Hello and welcome to The Culture Bar, a panel discussion podcast exploring the arts and music world. In this podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by one of our recent signings, British pianist Mishka Rushdie Momen. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this podcast with us today, Mishka. And I mean, the timing could not have been more perfect. Not only have you recently signed and joined the HP family, but it's also World Piano Day at the end of the month. So we could not have timed the podcast more perfectly. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. I'm thrilled to be part of the roster now.
It'd be lovely to first hear how you got into performing the piano. Can you remember where that first sort of interest sort of came about?
It was wholly accidental, actually. It really started because of my sister, who was learning the piano already. My sister is 4 years older than me, and at that age, when I was about four or five, I copied absolutely everything my sister did. In fact, looking at my diaries from then now, I mean, it must have been a nightmare for my sister because I was sort of just clinging to her the whole time. But she was learning the piano, so I had to do it too. And we had our little upright piano in our house. So I think I just climbed up and started playing around, and then started having piano lessons at school. And I don't remember the exact moment when I decided to become a pianist, but it was, I think, fairly immediate without understanding any of the implications of what that meant, without having any idea of what it meant to pursue music as a as one's life, as one's career. But I can't remember ever looking back or ever considering doing anything else really after that.
And did your sister still play the piano, or was that it after you got your interest? Or was it?
No, she continued for a while, and she played the cello in our school orchestra as well.
Oh wow, musical family then.
Yeah, well, we were lucky. I think we went to a state primary school, but it was sort of, I think, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, we were just very fortunate that it was normal to have music lessons at school, to have a school orchestra. It's actually quite devastating now to think about how those structures are disintegrating in front of us.
It was so fundamental having that music education for you because it's your career now, and
Yes.
it's a shame that some people now potentially might not have that as an option for them in schools.
Yeah, I think that's true, but maybe it's not even only because it became my career. I think even if it didn't, it's so important to have that sort of background in one's education and that exposure to this great art, which we're, I think, very much in danger of losing.
We're very fortunate that you had that education at school because of where you are today. Are there any particular pieces or composers that you particularly enjoy playing? Did you mention, I think in a previous conversation, something like you enjoy playing Schubert? Is that right, or have I made that up?
No, it's Schubert is absolutely central to my life. I've always loved his music, and I think with every year it seems to become more and more one of my big focuses. I'm 31 now, which is the age that Schubert was when he died, and I feel quite aware of that, strangely, playing a lot of his music this year, and sort of the idea that we're carrying his music on for him, and I think everybody who engages with his music and plays it is doing that. I love the humanity in his music. I think there's a great sort of unflinching honesty. He looks right into the face of darkness sometimes, and I have the sense when I play Schubert or when I listen to him that there are no limits to what he can express, and there's also a great sort of humility in the way that he expresses it, a great simplicity, which I find really almost unbearably moving. I don't think I could live without his music. He's absolutely my sort of desert island composer.
Wow, that's quite I was going to ask if there are any other composers, but Schubert clearly lists very high in your list. But is there any other composers or pieces of repertoire that you particularly enjoy performing?
Well, I think also, as part of my Holy Trinity, there's Mozart, Beethoven, and then the father of them all, Bach. And I'm also very much interested in English Renaissance music at the moment and have been playing a lot of Byrd, Bull, and Givens.
So that's quite interesting, because I was going to ask you actually if it is, I was going to say just the pianoforte. Obviously, it's not just, but are there any other sort of keyboard instruments that, like in the family, that you perform on? Like, do you perform on like the harpsichord, or even have you tried the organ, or have you explored any of those?
Yeah, I think if I couldn't be a pianist, the only other thing I could imagine being is an organist, probably.
It looks complicated whenever I've seen, people performing.
It looks fiendishly difficult. Yeah, yeah. No, I don't think I could do that. But I love the harpsichord. I love the forte piano. I've never had the chance to perform in them because I think logistically it can be quite difficult. But it's one of my my sort of dream projects actually, is to combine all three in a concert, so that the audience can hear all these different sonorities and how we can express different things even in the same music on different instruments. But I think it is valid to play this Renaissance music on the modern piano. I think even then it could be played either on the harpsichord or on virginals or on the organ. And I think fundamentally, it's not an arrangement; it is still part of the same family, and I think it can work very well.
We need to make that happen. We need to get a concert where we can explore all the different keyboard instruments in one concert. That sounds amazing. Yeah,
and I think it should be a core part of our repertoire because it's such glorious music, and it's so underplayed. And I have the zeal of an evangelist, I go around kind of forcing people to talk about it.
Well, you're definitely not forcing us today. We enjoy talking about it.
Yeah. I think in general, in England, you can't get away from the Tudors. And Shakespeare is such a fundamental part of the culture and of the English language. And I think the music of that time needs to be brought to the fore more as well, and not only in the context of early music groups who are wonderful, but I think it can sort of expand beyond that as well.
Have you done that? Do you have examples of where you've done that before with performances, or do you have plans in the future of bringing that out more?
Yeah, both. I like to combine it with other parts of my core repertoire. Like I'll often play a Byrd Fantasia in the middle of the program, perhaps in between, I don't know, a piece of Beethoven, then a piece of Prokofiev. It could be almost anything. I think there are links to be made between later repertoire, which are not always obvious. They might have more to do with character or texture. I don't think that we have only to play sort of one period of music at a time. And I think with great pieces, it can sit very well with other pieces. I think one thing I particularly love about Byrd is how comfortably the secular and the religious sit together, which I think is a feature of a lot of really profound music. I think that's obviously true in Bach. I think that's true of Mozart as well. In Byrd, there's, I think, just as much profundity and joy and lightness to be found in a Galliard as there might be in one of his plainsong arrangements.
Are there parallels then, would you say, between, the Elizabethan music and repertoire that is more modern, like the repertoire of today?
Yeah, I think absolutely that's true. I think, for example, if I think about fantasias that were written at that time, they have a sort of freedom of approach, which is very much a part of, I think, how music is written today and in the 20th century. In general, there are a lot of parallels, kind of really striking parallels between the Elizabethan period and the modern day. There's, I think, coming out of COVID, we're very aware of the feeling of plague, the threat of terrorism, recession, isolation from Europe. I think all these things are kind of really quite remarkably similar, but also maybe on a deeper level, there's perhaps the sense today that things can change very quickly, and that sort of the pendulum can swing in one way or another. I mean, when I think about Byrd, who's born in sort of the last years of Henry VIII's reign in the Reformation, and then Mary, Bloody Mary, comes back, and then it's Catholic again. And yesterday's orthodoxy becomes tomorrow's heresy. So I think we're grappling with a lot of those issues as well today.
Are there any particular sort of career highlights up to this date that you that you have? Like, is there anything particularly that sort of sticks in your mind as a particularly amazing experience for you as a performer?
Yeah, I think, well, sometimes a lot of the really important milestones are internal ones. Sort of when you feel you've developed your understanding of a certain piece, or you sort of rise to another level in a performance. I think actually during the pandemic, playing in streamed concerts from Wigmore Hall was a pretty unforgettable experience. Just playing in an empty hall and yet having this feeling of connection with people listening all over the world. And I think all the performers who gave streamed concerts in that period were very conscious of how hungry people were for music and how much it meant to them that they were still able to experience that in a way. And then when audience started coming back again, it was so special to feel everybody's energy in the hall and to feel how much this music meant to them. Which is why I think, just going back to what we said earlier, it's more critical than ever that we protect that, because I think that the public has a great appetite and need for classical music, which is perhaps not recognized by the government or not recognized by politicians, but it doesn't mean that it's not there.
Absolutely. And I think, if anything, those sort of months or year or so of lockdown actually showed how much live music, how important it is to our lives.
Yes.
And we were so lucky that, people like you performed on a digital platform so that we could all experience still that music, even when things seemed quite bleak. It was...
Yes. Well, I think as well the presenters who made that happen were very courageous. I mean, the Wigmore Hall was absolutely incredible. Doing that, it was a real lifeline, I think, both for audiences and for performers.
And I suppose, following on from that, is there anywhere that you would love to perform in? And I'm thinking it could be a venue or a particular country. Like, is there anywhere that sort of springs to mind that you'd really love to perform in?
It's quite hard to say because different venues can be special for different reasons. I mean, there are so many kind of intimate places which are exquisite, and then of course there are the numerous great halls of the world. On an entirely personal level, it's my dream to go to Hawaii, my childhood dream to go to Hawaii. So,
are there any music venues in Hawaii?
I think there are, actually.
Oh, we've got to make that happen.
Yeah.
I think it'd be lovely to explore your interests around the instrument, because obviously your career is performing, but is there anything else that beyond the instrument that you enjoy, that you're interested in?
I love to go on long walks with my dog. I go for a walk every day. We'll often go to Highgate Woods, which is an ancient woodland, absolutely exquisite, very near to where I live. We'll walk across the heath. Actually, lockdown was pretty... It's an awful thing to say, but in a way it was there was something idyllic about it because we had this amazing spring with sunshine every day, and we'd go for these long walks across the heath. And
what dog?
It was
what
just
breed
so peaceful.
Dog do you have?
She's a Whippet.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, she's gorgeous. And I love to go to art galleries and look at paintings. I particularly love Renaissance paintings. One of the big highlights for me recently was last year. There was a Raphael exhibition at the National Gallery, which was incredible. I mean, I don't actually know that much about art, but when I look at paintings, I love to compare them to different pieces of music. I mean, they might not be music of that period. Like, sometimes I'll look at a Raphael painting and think, oh, that looks like a Mozart aria, or that looks like a Bach prelude or something like that. So it's just it's wonderful actually to make these connections between colours in painting and the colours that we're trying to express when we play.
Definitely, and I think we're so lucky in London that we have these amazing places that are just free to us.
Exactly, yeah.
like Court Hall Institute at the Somerset House, that where we are today, and like you say, National Gallery. Like we're very, very lucky to have that.
Yeah, exactly. And I love TV. I adore TV.
Can't beat a bit of Netflix, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about composers that have inspired you, Schubert. But what about actually living composers? Like, is there anybody you'd love to collaborate with?
I think it's really important that we, as performers, engage with the music of our day. We're very lucky as pianists that the repertoire is already extremely rich and expansive, but we can always add to that. So far, I've very much enjoyed commissioning a couple of solo pieces. I commissioned a short piece by the wonderful composer Nico Muhly and by my friend, the American composer Vijay Iyer, which was nice because it had sort of jazz influences in it, which spoke to his background. And more recently, in collaboration with the Lucerne Festival, where I was able to make my debut last summer, I had the opportunity to commission a piece by Eloise Werner, who's a wonderful singer, vocalist, and composed a brilliant fantasy for the piano, which fitted in very well to a fantasy sort of themed recital that I did there. And I love Brett Dean's music, particularly also George Benjamin. I really adore, and Mark Anthony Turnage, for example. There are so many brilliant composers. I mean, Tom Addas, of course, is one of the greatest living composers. Kurtag. Yeah, I mean, I could go on. The list seems.
No, we almost sometimes program seems to put a large emphasis on these amazing works that have been around for a very long time, and it's there's so much rich repertoire out there from modern composers to perform.
It's striking actually how quickly things can become core repertoire. Like when I think of the Ligeti studies, which were written in the 80s, and they're now absolutely standard. I mean, every conservatoire student is learning them and playing them. And I think that's becoming true for Tom Addas's pieces as well. So I think we do have this immediate response to great pieces. I think when we hear something great, we know it, and it immediately. I love that it immediately gets absorbed into the canon.
Thank you so much, Mishka, for joining us for this Culture Bar podcast. It was really lovely to have you on and hear your experience and your interests. And yeah, we can't wait to see what the year brings.
Thank you.
And that is it for this episode of the Culture Bar podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. I'd like to thank Mishka for joining us for this particular podcast. Thank you to Merlin Thomas, our editor, and Robert Coltrane, who composed the theme tune music. Please do subscribe or leave us a review. You can visit harrisonparrott.com for more information. Do also take a look at the rest of the Culture Bar podcast for more on important topics in the arts and music world. See you soon.